In today's video we want to take a closer look at what makes the Aston Martin AMR23 such a quick car at testing and at the first race. First of all, some background information on the overall concept. Aston Martin, so the Silverstone-based team, which was Racing Point and Force India before, is traditionally a Mercedes customer team and uses the Mercedes engine and gearbox. That also means that they use the same suspension geometry at the rear axle. Before the big rule change in 2022, Mercedes had a concept of a low-sitting rear end, while Red Bull used an extensive rake angle to turn the whole flat floor into an angled surface, which creates more downforce, but also creates a big challenge to seal the huge gap at the back. The pink cars always tried to use the Red Bull concept with high rake angle, while using the Mercedes rear suspension geometry, and that was one of the big limiting factors for the team. The Mercedes geometry wasn't made for the high rake angles, so that was a disadvantage. Now in 2023, the pink cars are Aston Martin and they are still Mercedes customers. So engine, gearbox and rear suspension are the same. At the same time, the team also kept the concept of hiring ex-Red Bull staff, and so 7 key Red Bull engineers now work for Aston Martin. Most noted name being their new technical director Dan Fallows, who worked in the aerodynamic department of Red Bull together with Adrian Newey. The last Red Bull car he worked on was the RB18 of 2022. Fallows himself said that he learned from Newey not to be technically arrogant, as he put it. So he means that every idea will be heard, no matter where it's coming from. And he said he wants to continue this policy as technical director at Aston Martin. So it means that Aston Martin will be open for new technical solutions and innovations. And this is pretty much what we see on the new AMR23 with all its little details. Another thing Fallows learned from Newey is to create a car with stable aerodynamics instead of peak performance. Peak performance could mean that the car is only working in a small window and the airflow is stressed too much, which could cause sudden performance drops, which make the car unpredictable. Actually, concepts which rely on certain flow separations in some situations are always a risk because separations depend on ambient conditions, and these could change. That would make the car unpredictable, and this doesn't give the driver confidence. Only if a race car is predictable and gives the driver confidence, he is able to push the car to the limit. And this is another design direction we see on the AMR23. And before we look at the technical details, let's introduce today's sponsor, AtlasVPN. AtlasVPN is a virtual private network provider that helps to protect your privacy online. It's the highest rated free VPN on the market, and they are revolutionizing the market by offering the best free VPN service with no ads, no registration and no data logging. Additionally, you can literally save money when you book hotels or flights by easily changing your virtual location. And they protect all your devices with only one subscription. So check the link below to get a massive 83% off for AtlasVPN Premium and stay safe online. Now let's start with the chassis. It seems like Aston Martin is not using the Extreme X chassis design of the Mercedes anymore, where the radiators are pushed deeply into the chassis to create slim sidepods. If you want to know more about this, check out my other video below. Such a design was clever before 2022, when we still had a bargeboard area to push the front wheel wake outboard, and we wanted slim sidepods to get more energy to the back. Now, since 2022, we want large sidepods to keep the wake outboard, because there is no bargeboard area anymore. And since such an X chassis increases the center of gravity and overall weight, it looks like Aston Martin switched back to a more conventional chassis with the radiators mounted further outboard, which is not a problem because aerodynamically they want large sidepods anyway. And this solution saves some weight, which is another strong point of the AMR23. It's lighter than the minimum weight, so the team can work with ballast, further reducing center of gravity and improving balance. The next point is that they switched from air-to-air intercoolers to, by the looks of it, water-to-air intercoolers like the Mercedes Works team. That enables them to have a more compact cooling system, and they even introduced more center cooling this year, against the trend, to be able to shape their extreme sidepods. Another nice detail in the engine bay is how the primary of cylinder 5 wraps over the cylinder head, and cylinders 4 and 6 below, to clear the upper gearbox mounting point and to create a slimmer rear for more downforce. And interesting is the front suspension, which is Aston Martin's own creation and the only mechanical difference to the Mercedes. The Aston Martin goes over bumps as smoothly as the Red Bull, and they positioned the calipers in the lowest position, which reduces the center of gravity. And now to aerodynamics. We can see nicely how their round nose blends into a more square shape, so they can mount the upper wishbone in the highest possible position. The round tip helps to get air smoothly to the center of the car underneath the nose, so the floor entry. And of course the floor is the most important part at the ground effect race car, because if your floor is lacking performance, you need to compensate that with wings, and that adds drag. We haven't seen a picture of the floor from below yet, but we have this. What we can see here are the pockets of the lower crash tubes, mounting points, and flow paths of the water slides directly to the beam wing. Interesting here is the shape of the other side of the floor, and we can see that the center section is quite complex and not so smooth as early floors last year. We see a huge throat, a thicker section in the middle, and a very slim rear section. And we should note the little steps we see along the center part. We talked about these features last year already, and they help to energize the flow by mixing it and avoiding extensive boundary layer. And the one part we see very clearly on the Aston Martin is the bodywork. They basically kept the promising concept of large downwashing side pods and fine-tuned it. They use the fillet rule to the maximum and create super deep water slides which drag a lot of clean air into the channel and guide it towards the beam wing. Advantage of this concept is that you have strong control over the flow under all your angles. In other words, you can always get clean flow to the beam wing regardless of the angle of the incoming flow. At the same time, the large outboard wall keeps the front rear wake outside. And here you also see why the trick with the exhaust primaries is so important. To make sure the air reliably flows down into the channel, the rear mirror stay creates a downwashing vortex which pushes the flow inside. At the same time, the little flick at the halo and the vertical wall behind it make sure that cockpit losses stay on top of the bodywork and don't spill down into the sensitive area. And also they don't use paint and stickers in this sensitive area to not disturb the flow and to save weight. Internal cooling flow is a challenge with this concept because the water slides are so close to the radiators. Aston Martin then added additional louvers on top of the cooling path, again to make sure that these losses don't spill down. The bodywork then even pulls these losses closer to the center and down to make sure they pass between beam and rear wing at the back and don't hit anything important. And at the rear wing we see another nice detail. Aston Martin created a little element behind the rear wheel which helps to increase upwash and hence rear extraction. And this is a nice new interpretation of fillet rules after the bib wing and the armchair rear wing last year. So all in all, we can see lots of innovations and clever thinking at the Aston Martin AMR23. And what we see now is only the basis. And since the basis is good, the team can concentrate on adding performance instead of having to fix their concept like last year. And of course, Fellows remembers the numbers of the RB18. And Aston Martin said they exceeded these with the new car. The advantage Red Bull still has over Aston Martin is their progress of last year. So how do you like the new AMR23 and which position do you think Aston Martin can reach this year in the Constructors' Championship? Let me know in the comments below and check out my other videos for more.